Welcome, everybody, to the Retirement Success Maine Podcast. My name is Ben Smith, and I'm one of the co-hosts here on the show. Listeners, hope you're all doing well. Nice fall weather we're having right now. Apple picking, pumpkins, all those really good fall festivities. So hope you're out there enjoying those things. We'd love to have you be a part of the show. And you can always email us. My email address, bensmith@guidancepointrs.com. You can also go to YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. Just search Retirement Success in Maine Podcast. You can find our content there. Feel free to drop a line, and we'd love to discuss with you there. But also want to introduce my co-host, the Drake May, to my Jacoby Brissett, Curtis Wister. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Ben. I'm doing well. I appreciate it. How are you?
Good. So Patriots quarterbacks, a little bit of lineage there, and again, I think we're starting to see a little Drake May coming into the picture there as Patriots fans.
That's right.
But speaking of kind of Patriots and kind of things moving forward and inspiring us, as we all are, New England are. Today's episode really of the Retirement Success in Maine Podcast is going to be one that we wanted to speak to was resilience in the face of overwhelming odds.
Yep.
Right. And I know that's a theme we've talked about a few times in our show, and there's a lot of ways to explore it. And how can we all find deeper meaning in life, especially after going through some life-altering events? And I think as you hear this story, it's going to remind us of the fragility of life, but also the immense strength that can emerge from tragedy. But our role as advisors, when we talk to our clients, we're always talking about planning for our retirement, ensuring some financial stability, and building meaningful relationships. But again, this idea of resiliency and how do we cope when the unexpected happens? What do we do when life throws us a curveball that changes everything? So today we wanted to dive into a topic that we hope will resonate with many of you out there: how to recover emotionally and mentally from a near-death experience, and how to navigate the long-lasting effects that such an event can have on family, friends, and even our sense of self.
Yeah, that's right, Ben. And our guest today has an extraordinary story. In 2011, he was involved in a near fatal car accident with a tractor trailer, leaving him with just a 1% chance of survival. After a grueling recovery process, he emerged not only as a survivor, but as someone dedicated to helping others overcome their own adversities. He has gone on to become a keynote speaker, mental health advocate, self-published author, and life coach, using his story to empower people to face life's challenges with courage and resilience. Again, today we're going to hear from him about that experience, the emotional trauma of the event, how it impacted relationships with his family and friends, what lessons he's learned that could help all of us, especially, maybe those entering or living in retirement, finding meaning and purpose in the face of adversity. So again, whether you faced health challenges yourself, experienced a traumatic event, or simply want to better understand how to cope when life does feel overwhelming, this episode is going to be one for you. So again, we're hoping to inspire you to move forward with hope and determination. So with that, please join me in welcoming Ethan Poetic to the Retirement Success in Maine podcast. Ethan, thank you so much for coming on our show to share your story today.
Hey, thanks very much for having me on here. This is going to be a wonderful opportunity to impact lives.
Absolutely. I love that. And Ethan, I know obviously, we like to get to know our guests, and I think your story is really impactful. I know when we chatted a little bit in the pre-chat before, it moved me, and I'm really excited about our show today. But I know there's a lot we wanted to get to. I want to jump right in. I'd love for you to just kind of start with just taking us back to the day of the accident. Talk to us about what do you remember of the moments leading up to and immediately following the crash.
As I said before, I don't technically remember everything. What ended up happening was, as I was doing a lot of soul searching, my book titled The Inspirational Story, Ethan A. Poetic, Chronicles of Adversities, Education, Sports, Relationships, and Resiliency. It kind of like had me look at the thing for face value of looking at my Facebook wall of all the people saying they're praying for me. it required me to also look at the television story that was about it in that past tense. Then to look at the newspaper article where it says I'm in critical condition.
Mm.
And it's a combination of a lot of things where I had to do some deep soul searching from within and up here and listen to what other people have to say. Well, it's like, for example, you ever been to a party, you had a good time, and you were present there.
Sure.
Similar to like this car accident, I was present there, but I don't remember what happened there. So with this soul searching I had to do, it had to force me to step outside my comfort zone. Where last time I remember seeing it is a Hess gas station, it's shopping outlets, and boom, I wake up in the ICU unit 2 times.
Man.
But prior to that, a ride on the ambulance, based on that soul searching I had to do, the driver ran into an 18-wheeler head on. He dies instantly.
Mm.
My aunt suffers a lot of broken bones. The cousin who's behind her, who's her grandson, he only suffered mental stuff, but he got over it eventually. Unfortunately, the kid in the middle was her other grandchild who did not make it. And then for me being behind the driver, I had that 99% chance of death versus 1% chance of life. Those are not good odds.
No.
That's a high percentage of getting divorce rate, winning the lottery, dropping out of college, high school, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
But that 1% is what we need of a faith of emergency to override odds that are spaced against us in the game of life. And can you imagine the car getting cut in half by the jaws of life, by the fire department?
Mm.
Can you imagine when they had to take off their gloves and put their hand or fingers on my pulse to see if I was even breathing or had any blood flow?
Yeah.
Can you imagine the EMT people coming and the police coming where they had to put a neck brace on me and put me on a stretcher so delicately? Mm-hmm. And these are people I don't even know. Mm-hmm. Just like they don't know me.
Yeah.
And then there's also the situation of just the nearest hospital is 30 minutes away, but I should have died within 3 to 5 minutes. Well, it just didn't happen for some reason. So it had to be something supernatural, beyond measure, beyond belief. When I arrived at the hospital, people were still praying for me because the surgery was high risk to fix my aorta because I should have died of internal bleeding. When they did the surgery, they thought I died on the operating table. One of the nurses, I was told, cried hysterically. So they decided to put me in a coma or a whole bunch of medicine to see if I'll wake up. Because normally for a normal person, they wake up either the sound of the alarm, cell phone. For me, it's a matter of will I wake up ever again?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when I did wake up, I woke up twice. One was in the cloud 9 state. I'm heavily medicated due to injuries. Then I wake up in a more conscious state or look around like, why am I in the ICU unit? Mm-hmm. And nobody's telling me anything. And as I look at the door, I see a nurse crying tears of joy. And that's the day I was considered a walking living miracle.
Yeah. It's just incredible. Ethan, I want to ask, you just talked about it there. You were facing those odds, right? Those immense odds of not surviving. How was that kind of communicated to, and I know there's a lot you just kind of went through of you there's a lot you don't recall kind of firsthand, given the nature of it. How was the medical team kind of approaching you or your family, you know, as much as you can recall during this, while this was going on?
It's a combination of the accident happened. I'm at the hospital, and somebody calls my dad. My dad calls my mom, and they stop what they're doing in their life,
Yeah.
driving fast they can to Langston General Hospital. And traffic was backed up.
Yeah.
I believe the medical team did a very good job. I believe they, did everything they could in that high risk pressure moment that they were prepared for and trained and certified.
Mm.
The hospital was just a situation where I went from being able to eat to all of a sudden I'm on a feeding tube. I got IVs in my vein. I lost all this weight. I got people coming to visit me. People calling on that hospital phone line. People leaving get well cards. There may have been some balloons, and there's talking to the chaplain. And I got home to I was in there for like a month.
Yeah.
And I was just looking around like, what happened?
Yeah.
When I finally was told everything, normally you get told something so traumatic, you'll break down and cry.
Sure.
Show emotion. I didn't have that. It's like I heard what you said. But because I'm on all these pharmaceutical medicines, my body's five senses have become desensitized.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To the point where you can tell me your grandma died, I can hear it, but I don't feel it. It's like, for example, I shake your hand regularly, you'll feel a sense. But if I shake your hand with an oven mitt, I'm not going to feel that sensory. And that's how the medicine was. It stopped the sensory of it.
Mm.
But I also was in rehab, rebuilding muscles, struggling to pick up a beanbag. Again, people coming to visit me, calling on the phone. Then there's also just be encouraged to, not settle on being in a wheelchair, or else they're gonna start using blood thinners.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the speech therapy, the neck therapy, the walking therapy, the occupational therapy. You name it, I had to go through the ringer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Ethan, I hear what you're saying about, again, you kind of have this emotional dulling, right? Is that, you're on medication, you just went through something traumatic, right? I can imagine at some point, right, as you're going through rehab and kind of building yourself back up, there's still an emotional toll, even though in the moment you couldn't feel it. I'm sure even today there's an emotional toll that you've kind of had to manage and handle. Can you just talk about what were some of those hardest moments for you emotionally? Again, it might not be, as you said, immediately, but what did you experience and how did you work through it?
Well, it's a lot of things that were going on. I talk about it in the book where, I learned this quote where it gets worse before it gets better. And, I'm pretty sure people can relate to this. When you're in a hospital or rehab, people show up on their best behavior, treat you with the utmost respect. Unfortunately, there were a couple of people, that let me down that I talk about in the book. Like, for example, when I was on the feeding tube, there was a couple of people that I mentioned in the book that were not necessarily looking out for my best interests. And it's a shame that it comes down to that, but I also realize that's the foundation I stand on with them even before I was in that life or death situation. But I also found out people who were true to me when it came to help me get my driver's license, getting my permits, just that utmost support I was thankful of, and being on people's prayers lists. Emotionally, it's like I couldn't really express anything. It's like I hear what you're saying. I can see something that went wrong, but I'm desensitized, and it's to the point where it's not that I feel invisible. I don't feel as normal anymore.
Yeah.
Because when you're desensitized, it's like a person in a marriage. You may hear what your wife's saying, but it's one ear, not the other. And I'm only using that as an example because it's like you're telling me something, but since I'm on all these medications, it's one ear, out the other. If I see something that don't look right, it's one blink after another. But I still had a sense of faith that there had to be better days ahead. Because I just couldn't settle for the life that was going on for me.
Yeah. No, that's and Ethan, you've mentioned it a couple times, and I just want to pause and tell everyone listening, we will also have a link to your book in the show notes of the show, so people can go find that book and read all about it. I didn't want to leave that unsaid. I want to talk about maybe the relationships, with your family and friends, Ethan, certainly after the accident, right? I'm sure they experienced emotional trauma just like yourself. How did you all kind of navigate those changes together?
It was a situation where, this is where I got to keep it 100 since I mentioned in the book and everything else. It's like my parents decided to stop what they're doing and come together for my best interest. Because I'm in the hospital and rehab, prior to that, they were looking out for my best interests. Other people in the family, it was just like, here's the phone calls, here's the text messages. When I finally get a hold of a cell phone, there were people that were wondering why I didn't reply back to their message. I still had a sense to tell them this is what happened to me. And they were just shocked.
Yeah.
And then there's also people who were like wondering what's going on because they saw everything on my wall, but they didn't understand what was going on until they found out on the news and word of mouth. It was a situation where, it was a journey and a marathon of my recovery because there was no telling if I was going to eat again, walk properly, regain that weight. And, that kind of like has people think that sense of, wow, life can be changed in a snap of a finger.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even have to be your fault. I'll just say there were some family members that were encouraging, there, being present, talking on the phone, DMs. Remember one time this guy gave me his laptop to borrow. I remember just a lot of visitors. And one of the visitors I ended up finding later on in life turned out to be my cousin. We matched on Ancestry.com.
Wow.
We were both surprised. And then there was just an outpour of people just praying for better days because this is not the person they're used to seeing.
Sure.
And there was other people from different communities in different parts of the world that were just being more encouraging, being more influential in my life, just making sure I understand that there's more to me than what's going on right now.
Yeah.
And how I overcame it is outlasting a lot of things. It's like a person on drugs in rehab, I didn't, suffer from no opioid addiction. I didn't have no PTSD, and that's confirmed by a doctor in the notes, even with the MRI. I didn't even turn to anything that, most people would turn to as addictive to cope with life. Well, I will say I did get the help I needed through counseling when I started being detoxed off the medicine, being weaned, and actually, my body senses start coming back to me over time. Start eating again, then I get off the feeding tube. But then one moment I'm thinking, I spent all this time recovering. Now I gotta go through a whole nother journey. And that's what I talk about in the book. It involves, certain people just not, making healthy decisions. Like one person giving money to a person over the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Another person, stealing from their job and facing, some serious charges from either the state general attorney or the county DA. Those are serious situations. And, there's a couple more situations that happen, but ultimately, life happens. And during times of adversity, you get to see a person's true character.
Yeah. And Ethan, I know, obviously there's a lot there and we're going to cover a lot more of this, but, near-death experiences is kind of its own little thing here too. And especially as a younger person going through it, right? As I know when we're all younger, we kind of have this sense of invulnerability and oh, that can't happen to me. And I can kind of do whatever I want in my life. And I think as we get older, we start to get a little more sense of mortality and that life is more precious. And I know you got that dose of it right out the gate, right? Here's this accident, you, as you said, it wasn't even something that you did to yourself. It was something that happened to you. And I just want to hear from you about how did that change your outlook on life, right? As here you are, as you said, had a long recovery, you had long rehab, changing that outlook on life, and how has that changed how you approach everyday interactions and decisions?
It changed in a lot of ways to just find out who was really there for me versus those who were just there for the moment or just there because they were concerned. But eventually people got going with their lives. And that happens. It changed in a way of like when I did start working again with the after school program, with sports, and working inside classrooms and going to college. Like college was the sanctuary where I could just show up here, don't have to worry about talking about that ever again. Mm. Well, I'm showing up to work, I'm not sure if if you two guys are parents or proud uncles, if somebody's working with your kids or somebody else's kids or your nieces or nephews in a school setting, after school setting, you're going to want to know who that person is because sometimes the human resources misses things. And what ended up happening was I was being researched by parents. And then they would show up to me with their cell phones at a sporting event and say, "Is this you from the car accident?" Oh my. I'm like, "Yeah, that is me." And it just happened so often. It became overwhelming because I was not ready to talk about it. And eventually my boss said, I'm inspiration. I got to learn how to deal with it. And then there's a time where I've been working in the classrooms. I thought I could just, be myself in the education field, being a teacher assistant, building assistant, or working with kids with special needs. There were a few times where, these teachers researched me. Yeah. And one time, teacher said they want to go on a coffee break. Oh, Ethan, can you talk about your story in your book? I wasn't ready to talk about that. Then there's another time where I got an email from a teacher saying, oh, instead of us doing this reading lesson, can you just tell them your story? And then when I finally did, when it finally happened with it's like a follow up interview from the television and newspaper, I was more willing to speak about it in a sense of I'm an evolved version of myself. I'm not that person of the past tense, but I did experience it. The next thing you know, principals find out, like, what? Colleges are like, we didn't even know about this.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's a lot of spotlight on me, and I thought I was going to need a police escort to work moving forward.
Nice.
And then when I made the newspaper, I bought several copies of it, laminated them, and put them in a frame. Television, I had help from, Peggle's Produce, which is a mom and pop, produce, one of the best in America. The CFO contacted one of the television reporters, suggested they do a story on me, a follow-up story. And the same day I graduated from college, well, before the college, first I had to get done work, then go to Talo Prep, which is a nonprofit organization helping people with, going further education much more. There's a reporter, the television person, and her staff. We go inside to the interview, and luckily I brought my, certain things with me for B-roll. It was a wonderful interview. Jordan Steffi was also interviewed. He was also the former CEO of Atala Prep, formerly known as Children Deserve a Chance Foundation. After that was done, I left, pick up my father figure. We started off as neighbors. Then we go straight to the college graduation ceremony. I give him a ticket. And from there, the camera people were ready to record me going up that stage, get my name announced. I had that diploma, or no, actually college degree. They did a few more questions afterwards. Then the following day or two, they came to my workplace to do some B-roll there. We took pictures. It was a great feeling. Then there's also the time where at a Talo Prep again, where the Lancaster newspaper, also known as LMP for abbreviation, interviewed me there. That was one of the most intense interviews I ever had.
Wow.
And they interviewed Jordan Steffi for a quote or two. And then from there, there's a lot of accolades and awards that followed up with, as far as a proclamation declaration from Lancaster City Council and the mayor, Denise Sirachi. Then receiving 2 Pennsylvania Commonwealth citations from both the Republicans and Democrats for non-political reasons, just more inspiring and uplifting reasons.
Sure.
And then there was also from Mills University. Not only I received a college degree, I also received a Overcoming Adversity Award from the former head department of communication and theater. Her name is Dr. Teresa Russell Loretz. I also was featured in Alumni Spotlight. Then I was featured in the Snapper newspaper for having my book signing there. Yeah, I can go on with many accolades and recognitions I received, but I only use that to show people that when you overcome your own adversities and life challenges, there is beauty on the other side. There's light at the end of the tunnel. And of course, you can go from victim to victor. You just got to be willing to do the work with the right people in your corner and best interests.
That's right. That's right, Ethan. And thank you for taking us through that, because I think it really shows how, you've become an inspiration to so many with your story, right? And you mentioned, in the beginning, it may have been tough to talk about it, but now you're talking about it all the time, and people are really kind of using it as a celebration of you and inspiration to others. So I appreciate you sharing that all with us. I want to, something you just said there at the end about overcoming, and obviously for you and your story, that involved a lot of physical rehab, right? So, after such serious injuries to you, regaining even basic functions can be incredibly difficult. Can you just talk about what are some of the small victories during your physical recovery process that really helped, keep pushing you forward?
This is going to be humbling for a lot of people and kids. There's times where I have to tell them I had to sound out words just like you.
Yeah.
I had to read and finger point sentences just like you. I remember this doctor or physical therapy person, I'm not going to get to the full story. I'm just saying this person didn't want me to settle on being in a wheelchair. They were really hard on me, and they didn't want to let up. And there's also picking up that bean bag, struggling to do that. Then there's also walking up maybe a few steps. Then there's also the neck exercises. Then there's also the stretching aspect of moving my legs around to increase blood flow. Full range of motion. And then the day I could finally eat, drink again. And then the big thing that happened at a camp, and I'll keep it short, was I was just asked to volunteer there. And this guy wanted me to speak my story there while I'm playing the video games. Mm-hmm. And he didn't tell me that before I became a passenger in his car. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was during those times where I just wasn't ready. But when I got done speaking, not as professionally as I am now, but then I felt humble and I needed some time to myself. And then eventually, one of the things that really was groundbreaking was, playing, touch football. I was one of the last people to get picked. I figured, I'll just catch a few balls just for fun. But when the ball got thrown to me, I caught it, and I never in my life ran that fast before the car accident, as far as everything I endured. And the outrun everybody, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I was just looking around like, did this just happen? Is this real? Did I regain my breakaway speed? And I didn't even lift any weights or have a body trainer. And, it felt good to have that athletic ability back.
I bet.
And it just was some people just couldn't believe it. I go from this near fatal car accident, laying on a anticipated deathbed, where the coroner maybe get called, then my parents got to identify me. Do funeral arrangements, to all of a sudden, I can run fast again. Doesn't even include me having a brand new car that I ended up getting later on in life. Starting my own business.
Yeah.
And much more. And, it turned out the best was yet to come.
Love that. And Ethan, I know obviously you've been out speaking, and some of it's not just kind of learning to tell your story, but also I think there's things in terms of advice, because there's experiences that you've endured that maybe others are starting to endure themselves, right? You've lived things that maybe others haven't at this point. And again, I know tragically that's the story, but again, the adversity and overcoming it is such a big part of who you are and kind of what you are today. I know from our audience that we have a lot of retirees and pre-retirees that listen to our show, right? And I know it's a very common thing that we see is that people are retiring and they have physical limitations, right? Is that, it's tough for them to move like they did, or, something they could do previously, now they can't. So what would you, just from obviously you were in that, and I know you talked about breaking through and you were able to regain some of your athletic ability, but even in the moment where you were saying, hey, I can't do a lot of things, you kind of had to reconcile that a little bit. So what advice can you offer to people dealing with physical challenges about staying hopeful and positive during recovery, or even managing chronic health issues? How do you kind of keep that attitude up? Because I can see where it's a day by day thing that's really difficult to kind of push through and just every day have a positive attitude as much as you can.
Well, what I could tell you is, it's about timing and understanding that we all enter different phases of our lives. Like even the best athletes have to slow down and transition. Some transition to being speakers, coaches, trainers, physical therapy, or those, who are in the field of education, college professors. They make transitions as well. When it comes to, your ability, we're not the same people we were before physically. But it's a matter of just being thankful for the ability we do have and understand that, what is it that you want to do again that you enjoy doing, whether it's writing, reading, listening, seeing again. Those little things we sometimes take advantage of. When reality is that, it can happen to any one of us. But I still see people who still got that it factor in running ability, even at 81.
Yeah.
Long distance running. I still see people who still weight training even in their 70s. So the question becomes, what is it that you want to do at your 24 hours, 1 hour at a time?
Yeah.
And we have to understand that, you don't have to be the most athletic person. You don't have to be the best of the best. Just stay in your own lane and focus on yourself on an individual level. Because there's people who come back from the military that, have to deal with post-traumatic stress disorders.
Yeah.
And reliving, seeing a comrade or a person they were close to die right before their eyes. Eventually they'll get the help they need to the VA hospital and everything else. So the question becomes, what type of help do you need to get back where you want to be in life? And I only say that from a position of we have to ask ourselves honest questions in order to be part of the solution. Because I'm not here to sugarcoat anything.
Yeah.
Because my car accident can't be sugarcoated when it's on television, radio, podcasts, magazines, newspapers, newsletters, and different accolades and awards. It's like kids are born with that sixth sense. They know when someone's being real, and they know who to be safe around, and not know who to be around. And I say that in a sense how it relates to people, where you have to understand who do you want to be around that's going to help you become the better version of yourself, as opposed to who wants to bring you down and hold you back.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right, Ethan. And I want to ask another question about your kind of specifically your journey and your recovery. And again, you can't say enough how difficult it must have been. Were there moments in that recovery where you felt like giving up? And, if so, what was it or who was it? Kind of what was the combination there that really kept you going?
Yeah, there were times where I wanted to.
Yeah.
It's just, let's say you're a kid, you get a boo-boo, you fall off the bike, you get back up.
Yeah.
In this situation, it's overcoming life and death. And it's going to take more than a Band-Aid and getting back up to get back to what you was doing. It took time, countless hours. I remember this one person came to my house or working on little things for physical therapy, making sure I clean out my feeding tube. And then, you got so many visitors coming by. So there's got to be accountability.
Sure.
They're not going to want to see me go out and just give up. And it's just a situation where I wanted more for myself than what I was experiencing. Because, it's, one thing I learned about life is, it's one thing for a person to be a parent, but it's no fun bearing your own child. And I don't think my parents want that to happen for themselves. Yeah. There was also a situation, my grandma wouldn't want to see me buried.
Mm-hmm.
No.
So that's my response.
Yeah.
Love that. And I think, Ethan, living for others, right, is a greater purpose, of ourselves. And I love that you were kind of using that as your fuel and motivation, that, you were gonna you didn't want your family to go through that experience. And I know what my next question is going to be about how has the experience changed the way you view life. And I can just even tell from the how you view relationships is one of the big things that you just were describing. But how, I guess, want to ask it from not just from your own sense of today, right? Is kind of thinking about maybe pre-accident, who you were, what your purpose was at that point, what you thought was meaning and resilience at that moment, to today. So I guess what do you kind of view yourself right now of what do you find your purpose to be, kind of this as we're kind of sitting here today on a podcast?
Well, prior to college, and there was already a plan for me to get my driver's license, work, and do what I was supposed to do. But I'm a former student athlete. But I also realized, there's a business side to it. There's people making money, trainers, AAU coaches, any sports, travel clubs, sports complex facilities, you name it. As far as moving forward from the situation, it's just give me a different perspective of, when kids learn about my story and parents, it's like there's certain people I can see myself in. With growing up in a single parent household, having a certain estranged relationship with a certain individual, and just looking at perspective of I see myself in you just like they see themselves in me sometimes. What keeps me going sometimes is just, kids show up when I'm at their sporting events, or sometimes when I used to work in the classrooms, they tell me, "Oh, I want you to come see me at this musical event. I want you to see me at my sporting event. Or I want you to come see me at this after school club. Or I want you to see me at this child care center. Or I want you to meet my mom." It's those little things, and there's also parents contacting me like, "Hey, I need you to come spend some time with my son. We'll be here." There's times I get invited to certain events. I end up realizing, some of these kids, come from disadvantaged backgrounds like how I did. And I could feel it in my heart, and that sense of connection, like, whoa, I see a rerun, but that's not technically my child.
Yeah.
And then I look at the certain moms who are single parents, too many times, we have this double standard of making a man who's the father look bad, but want to have the woman who's single with all these kids look innocent. But the reality is that you can't have a double standard, because that woman chose to give life. That woman chose to, be sexually active and continue to, repeat the cycle and create a disadvantaged environment, but get incentivized by the government to continue it. But it also causes a backlog for social workers. And too many times I see, I'm only talking about it from experience, not that I'm, bashing anyone. Too many people settle on being a victim instead of having the courage to rise up to be a victor.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you want to be this victim person, you want to think nothing's your fault or you're not responsible for. When you just do that too often, you give away your value, your self-worth, your pride, and your dignity. But when you become the victor, you regain all that stuff and much more.
Yeah.
In order to gain that victor mentality, you have to learn to be humble. And too many times I see people just being in this copycat league, wanting to repeat the bad cycle. But ultimately, I share words of wisdom and advice to certain parents like, hey, you don't have to keep having all these kids that you can't afford to take care of.
Mm-hmm.
There's times I tell men, like, you don't have to keep impregnating these women you don't plan on being with and take care of, even though it's not always the case. And it's just, it's one thing to hear from an educator, but it's much different when they hear from somebody who's been there, went through it, and came out on the other side.
Yeah.
And I learned to use my influences to, step into other areas of positive influences that encourage people to become the best version of themselves. Like, for example, I never used to watch high school volleyball, soccer, field hockey, but I decided to go there and make an impact there. There's also showing up to venues I normally don't go to, like a Greek Gyro Fest. There's, a couple of times where I'm taking pictures with, people in political leadership roles.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, we all have a choice to make in what we do good with our influences. And, through this journey, I learned I was more than just a student athlete. I'm more than a person who comes from a single parent household that depend on a lot of government benefits. And I outlasted that stuff.
Yeah. You absolutely did, Ethan. And it's I thinking through this whole conversation, and I know your story, and I'm excited for our listeners to hear your story because it's just incredible, and it shows in the work you're doing today, right? It's one of those stories that I know I don't know because I haven't been through it, but seeing you talk about it, I know it's tough for you. But we just really appreciate you sharing that story. I do have one kind of wrap up question for you, Ethan, on our show. So, we're here on the Retirement Success in Maine podcast. Ben and I are located in the state of Maine. A lot of our listeners are either close to retirement or are living through their retirement success. So I like to ask all of our guests, how are you, Ethan, going to find your own retirement success when you get there? I know you're young, so I'm asking you to kind of think ahead to retirement. What does that look like? What's a successful retirement for you?
Well, I got multiple, answers to that. Growing up, I learned the American way was, people can retire early in their 40s. They did 20 years at a company, like a state, work for the state or the county, take the penalty on the chin. Some people, might want to retire in their 60s. But also learn a different perspective of, look at the Amish, the Mennonites, and the Quakers, and they don't believe in retirement.
Mm-hmm.
So they're making more money continuing to work than they would have retired. Plus, they don't put into the state and federal system.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to me, I look at it like, why do I want to retire when there's still more to life? It's just certain things change. Now, one thing I am not doing anymore is being a student athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I transitioned where I used to work the sporting events to be the spectator now. And I see retirement as a transition for some people. I understand some people might not want to work anymore, that 9 to 5 or the 40-hour work week or, 60 hours a week on a salary with benefits. All I can say is, I know what my purpose is to continue to make an impact on Earth with speaking engagements, my books, allowing people to see me on social media, public appearances, because I come a long way.
Yeah.
The word retirement, I don't have any disabilities, physically, emotionally, and all this other stuff that I know of. I just know that, retirement looks differently for some people. Some people might want to retire to fulfill their bucket list,
Mm-hmm.
go on these all expenses paid vacations, spend more time with the grandchildren or sometimes great grandchildren, be more involved in a more behind the scenes role with community engagement. community relations. And, it's just a situation where some people might want to do things more on their own terms. Like I see some people who are retired who might not want to answer their cell phone until the evening. And if something was really important, somebody would left a voicemail or a text message showing that it was real urgent. But retirement looks different for everybody. And some people, like I said before, in the Amish and Mennonite culture and Quaker culture, don't believe in retirement because they want to put their financial trust in the government.
Mm-hmm.
Because even when you do file for retirement, you may make 60 to 80% what you made.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, some people do need to retire because, working strenuous jobs can take a toll on a person's life, a person's marriage, relationships. And then, from a business standpoint, some companies might want to, hire someone that's younger and more affordable for their alleged budget.
Mm-hmm. And
So as for me, as of now, I'm self-employed, and it's too soon for me to think about retirement when the best is yet to come.
Yeah. I love that. And Ethan, I know that's probably going to be your answer in another 40 or 50 years, I'm sure. Is you're going to go, hey, the best is always going to be around the next corner. I think you brought up a lot of key things that we're finding with our guests that have come on about transitions, about resiliency, optimism, that really these are just pivots, and just kind of finding yourself within that pivot is really important. I do want to also just put out there, the listeners, if you want to kind of follow Ethan, you can go to Instagram, Snapchat, or TikTok, and the username is Ethan Poetic 23. Or on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, just search Ethan Poetic. You can find him there. We'll have a link to Ethan's website, his book. He actually did an Audible as well. I'm a big Audible guy. And also LinkedIn. You can kind of check him out there. But Ethan, thank you so much for coming on our show today. Again, I know Curtis said as well, your story of resiliency and just kind of what you had to fight through and kind of finding yourself, but also the message of now that you're sharing and giving back to the community and you're inspiring others is just really just inspirational for us. And I know we're not even in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, so we really want to honor that. And thank you so much for coming on our show, because I know our listeners got a lot out of it today.
Yes, thank you for having me on your show. Thank you for having me, make an impact in somebody's life or lives. My website's called Ethan Speaks. For serious inquiries for whether it be my book, I'll sign it, autograph it, and mail it to you. I do value my services and my products. And I just want to say, be encouraged to fight the good fight and understand your mental health is your wealth.
Awesome. Ethan, thanks so much for coming on our show, and I would love to hear from you sometime down the road. Take care.